With Lululemon, the real gift happens when your holiday checklist is complete. When you give them the fan-favorite Everywhere belt bag, you both get to experience more of this. And when the ultra-soothing Rest Feel slides are their gift, you both get more moments like this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to find last-minute gifts that bring presents. Open the moment. Shop now at Lululemon.com.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
It's the Larry Kudlow Show. Free market prosperity starts here. Now, here's Larry Kudlow.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to try to find John Carney, Breitbart business editor, Business Digest. John is Breitbart editor for economics and finance and co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest, regular on the TV show, regular on the radio show. Must read Business Digest. So, John, you know, even the Wall Street Journal, I'm looking here, the editorial, I guess it was Thursday, the Fed admits an inflation mistake, and then the subheader, yet the central bank still cuts its target rate by another 25 basis points, and then its explanation isn't convincing. And the market, that's pretty good for the editorial page, and the market fell 1,100 points. What's going on here with this Fed story? How do you read it?
So one thing that I want to just take a step back and say, remember 3 years ago, the Fed announced that inflation would be transitory, that it would go away. Well, the most recent projections show that they think we are going to have 2.5% inflation up through the end of next year. So in other words, 6 years later, inflation will still be elevated, and yet they have cut rates three times in a row, one of them being the outrageous 50 basis point cut back in September. The Fed really has more or less admitted that they haven't gotten inflation under control, that it's not coming down even to their target in any normal, decent time span. And Larry, as you have pointed out, because we have run ahead of target for so long, that means prices are never getting back to a normal level. You actually need to run below target if you're going to get back to the trend level and for prices to feel normal again. Instead, we're going to run above target really as far as the eye can see, because they think it till the end of next year we'll have high inflation. And I don't really trust that they have any visibility beyond next year.
For middle-class working folks, again, the upper classes don't really care that much. We got a lot of liquidity, and I'll talk about that.
Stock market has been doing well,
Right.
so.
Exactly. But did I get this right? Their so-called dot plot, they're saying they won't hit the 2% target now until when? Until like 2027? Is that possible? Is that right?
Yes.
That's insane.
It sounds ridiculous. But yes, what they are saying is, remember that they first declared it transitory in 2021. And now they are saying they will not hit the target until 2027. And yet they cut, which really doesn't make a lot of sense. I think what happened was, frankly, the cut was actually political, that they really wanted to try to announce that inflation could be over prior to the election to give Kamala Harris a better chance of winning. I can't figure out any other explanation. And then they had to cut in November and they had to cut in December, or else it would have been too embarrassing. But frankly, this is embarrassing. This is them admitting that it was a mistake. I would not be surprised if, look, Donald Trump's economic policies might rescue us from this by creating more on the supply side. But if we don't get that soon enough, we may start to get inflation going higher. The Fed is actually predicting that inflation will be higher at the end of 2025 than it is right now. So they think inflation is going up, and yet they cut rates.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I'm looking at it. PCE inflation. Yeah, slightly higher. You know, that's a really key point that deserves some visibility, that Mr. Trump may inherit Bidenflation, which is, in some sense, I know government spending was a big part of it.
Absolutely.
And those spending baselines are still going up, but the Federal Reserve is a big part of it, too. It was pointed out to me by, Kevin Warsh, former Fed governor, maybe a future Fed chairman. I was on the phone with him this week. The money supply is starting to grow again. The most it's grown in a couple of years. It's not growing at 30, but it is growing back to 5%. And the other thing is, John Carney, the Fed's balance sheet, which is really the source of all the money and liquidity in the system, that thing years ago, before the financial crisis, was less than $1 trillion balance sheet. It's like a bank, okay? Banks have balance sheets. Households have balance sheets, what do you want? Anyway, they're at 7. They got as high as $9 trillion during the pandemic. They're at $7 trillion now. But what they should be doing is getting, moving that down to $5 trillion or $4 trillion. In other words, if you're worried about high prices, you should be draining money. And it's not about interest rates per se. It's about how much money is sloshing around the system. Now, you and I haven't really talked about this, but this is the basic, it used to be called the monetary base. And they're only doing it slowly, slowly amounts. I mean, it would take forever to get it back down. I see that as one of the problems, and I think a new Fed chairman would have to deal with that.
I think that's right, Larry, that not paying attention to the quantity of money has been one of the big mistakes this Fed has made. Because if you watch it pretty closely, every time the quantity of money starts to grow, we get inflation growing. It's almost old-fashioned at this point. People haven't really looked at quantity of money since, like, the Volcker years. They've been so fixed on the the rate changes and whether it's going up or down. But I do think the quantity of money matters. And you're absolutely right. It's started to go back up, and this means that we're going to get very little disinflation coming at all. And so inflation's hasn't come down for 6 months. The Fed doesn't think it's coming down at all. And I think that is a burden that the Trump administration is going to face, because the people want inflation to come down. But it is you can bring it down through fiscal and regulatory policy by expanding the supply side of the economy. But when you have a Fed that is cutting rates and therefore feeding the demand side, you actually end up, this is something that almost is unique in history, where we may have a Fed that is looser than the executive branch, the president of the United States, wants it to be. Typically, it's been the opposite, where you have the president, worried that the Fed is tightening too much and is going to, not. Reagan worried at the beginning of the Reagan administration that Volcker's tightening might actually hurt him. It turned out to benefit him, because when inflation came down, people were a lot happier.
That's
but
right.
They were worried early on. That's not the case now. The Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration, people are worried that too much inflation will damage their agenda.
Yes, I think so. Right. The Reagan years, the tax cuts produced more goods on the supply side, and Volcker produced less money, so demand came down, supply went up, and the inflation rate dropped to about 2% by the mid-'80s.
Right.
That's what you want. So, you know what, John, the stocks fell Wednesday on Jay Powell's announcement of all this gobbledygook. Nobody knows what the hell he's talking about. Nobody could figure it out, scratching their heads. If you see more inflation, why are you cutting rates? It was really just I think you said this on our TV show, it was a big vote of no confidence in Powell, period.
That's right. Actually, I laughed a little when you said that the Wall Street Journal said that his explanation wasn't persuasive. I would say it wasn't comprehensible. I had no idea what any of that gobbledygook meant. And I think that's actually why the market fell, because if you can tell the market what you're doing and why, and it makes sense, then investors know what to do with it. What happened this week on Wednesday was people listened to what Powell said. They saw the dot plot say inflation isn't going down, and then they saw the Fed cut as well and said, none of this makes any sense. I lack confidence in the ability of the Fed to manage the economy, and that's why the stock market fell so much.
And bond yields went up anyways. I mean, that's another vote of no confidence. Anyway, John Carney, Breitbart news editor for economics and finance, and folks, co-author of the Breitbart Business Digest, which is daily. You can get it. It's a must-read. So just about the best product out there.